King Charles reportedly wants to heal the long-running rift with his son and daughter-in-law. Insiders say he could offer Harry a significant Windsor property, such as Royal Lodge, as it would send a message that the door is still open. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor moved out of Royal Lodge last month, in the dead of night, by the way. He'd lived in this 30-bedroom house for 2 decades, although he didn't pay much rent. Some sources say Harry and Meghan won't want to be associated with the property as it's tied up in scandal. Carol in Berkshire, do you think we need to lure them back?
I think what you all need to do is leave Harry and Meghan alone.
Oh.
Harry and Meghan, there's no report from them that they actually want to come back to the UK. It's just another distraction from the whole Andrew thing. They were used for years over, Andrew, everything negative about Meghan and Harry, and people will say things like Harry wrote a book. Well, God, if I was in his position, I would have written a book.
Well, I mean, he did actually basically accuse the royal family of racism, didn't he? So.
No, he didn't accuse them of racism.
Yeah,
that was the words. No, that was the words that were used by other people.
Right.
But what they said is, and let's be honest, it's an institution. Do you really think there was no racism there?
Well, that's a different thing. No, I'm just saying that's why it's worth talking about, isn't it? I mean, in the end, come on, we've all had the same journey here. We all love Diana. We saw the terrible tragedy that befell her. We felt so sorry for those 2 boys. Now we have the younger one growing up with a real, looks like some sort of anguish in his soul, and I don't see why we can't talk about that. Okay.
I think Carol makes an interesting point, though. Why would she want to come back? She had a terrible time.
But they might be they might just be testing reactions. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it, where they say, we're thinking about it. And I just think the bigger thing is they missed the end of the Queen's life. They missed the last Christmas at Sandringham.
I am tired. Not mildly irritated, not slightly annoyed. I am genuinely exhausted with the British media circus. And today's episode of The Jeremy Vine Show just pushed it completely over the edge. Because what on earth was that discussion? Should King Charles give Harry and Meghan Royal Lodge? Are we serious right now? Are we actually doing this? We just watched a whole televised debate built on pure imagination, pure speculation, fantasy presented as worthy of serious discussion. No statement from Harry, no statement from Meghan, no confirmation from Buckingham Palace, no credible sourcing from anyone with actual knowledge. Just insiders say and sources suggest. And suddenly, it's a national housing summit requiring caller input and panel debate. Meanwhile, there are actual issues happening in the world. Real news, real problems, real stories that deserve airtime and analysis. But no, let's gather the panel. Let's summon the dramatic music. Let's clutch our collective pearls and speculate endlessly about whether 2 financially independent adults living comfortably in California need to be lured back to a 30-bedroom estate in Windsor. The obsession is unreal. It has reached levels that would be clinically concerning if we were talking about a person rather than a media industry. First of all, let's talk about what Royal Lodge actually is, because context matters here. Royal Lodge is not some cozy fixer-upper cottage with charm and neutral history. It is the former residence of Andrew Windsor, a property absolutely soaked in controversy, scandal, and years of public discomfort. Andrew reportedly moved out in the dead of night, according to media reports. Whether that's literally true or tabloid dramatization, the point is the departure was connected to his catastrophic fall from grace. And somehow, the media floats his, let's move Harry and Meghan in. That is not reconciliation. That is not a thoughtful family gesture. That is narrative repurposing. That is trying to rebrand a problematic property by associating it with different family members. This entire conversation felt less like genuine speculation about housing logistics and more like a distraction campaign dressed up as family healing discussion. Notice something interesting about the timing of these conversations? Whenever the Andrew situation resurfaces, whenever uncomfortable questions about his spandals bubble up, whenever there's renewed scrutiny on how that was handled, whenever institutional accountability questions arise, here comes a shiny new headline. Will Harry return? Is Meghan ready to reconcile? Should the king offer them a grand gesture? Royal Lodge could be the key to bringing them home. It is predictable. It is a pattern. It is transparent once you start watching for it. These speculative Sussex stories serve a function. They change the subject. They redirect attention. They give commentators something to debate that feels royal adjacent, but doesn't require examining uncomfortable institutional failures. And I'm sorry, but the framing throughout the segment was insulting to everyone's intelligence. Do we need to lure them back? Lure? Lure? Like they're wandering wildlife that needs bait? Like they're lost pets who might wander home if you leave treats on the porch? Harry and Meghan are not homeless. They are not displaced refugees. They are not standing outside Buckingham Palace with suitcases, hoping someone will notice them and offer shelter. They live in Montecito, California, in a house they purchased, in a community they chose. They built a life there. They have professional projects, business partnerships, philanthropic initiatives through Archwell, and children growing up in a peaceful, private environment. Why is that so impossibly hard for UK media to accept as a legitimate life choice? The caller, Carol, said what many of us have been screaming for years: leave them alone. And she was absolutely right. There has been no report, none, zero, not one credible source from Harry and Meghan indicating they want to return to the UK permanently. No public campaign to reclaim royal property, no statements about missing Windsor real estate, no hints that they're reconsidering their California life. Yet the media manufactures a narrative out of thin air, debates it on television as if it's established fact, and then uses it as an excuse to relitigate every grievance from the past 6 years. It's a self-sustaining cycle that generates content without requiring any actual news to occur. And then Jeremy pivots to Diana. Of course he does, because when you need emotional weight, when you need to add gravitas to a speculative housing discussion, invoke Diana. Remind everyone of tragedy, frame Harry as a permanently wounded boy with anguish in his soul, reduce a grown man with extensive military service, significant philanthropic achievements, and global humanitarian influence into a permanent state of childhood grief. It's emotional manipulation. It's using tragedy as narrative seasoning. Harry is a grown man now, a father and a husband. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, flying Apache helicopters in active combat. He founded the Invictus Games, which has genuinely transformed the lives of wounded veterans across dozens of nations. He has spoken openly, courageously, about therapy, trauma processing, and mental health in ways that modernized conversations the monarchy historically avoided. He is an adult with agency, accomplishments, and considered choices. But in persistent media narratives, he exists in only a few states. Angry Harry, lost Harry, or yearning to come home Harry. It apparently cannot possibly be that he made a calculated, rational decision to leave an institution that he believed was actively harming his family's well-being. Let's talk about the racism comment, because Jeremy couldn't resist bringing that up either during the segment. During the Oprah interview with Meghan and Harry, they described conversations within the royal family about concerns regarding their unborn child's skin tone. They did not publicly name the person who made these comments. They did not label the entire royal family as racist. They described a specific experience and left the public to interpret its significance. The British press, however, amplified that disclosure, reframed it, weaponized the word racism for months of coverage, and then used it to attack Harry and Meghan for accusing the family. And now, years later, it's still deployed as shorthand to discredit them. They called the family racist. becomes the simplified version that erases all nuance. But here's the uncomfortable truth that media discussions tiptoe around. Institutions can have systemic issues, problematic patterns, and ingrained biases without every individual within them being a cartoon villain. Acknowledging that possibility, discussing it honestly, should not be treated like treason or family betrayal. The larger, more fundamental problem with all of this coverage is the constant positioning of Harry and Meghan as satellites perpetually orbiting the monarchy, waiting for permission to land. They left. That was the headline in January 2020. That was the decision. That was the announced plan. They stepped back from senior royal duties, they moved to North America, they built independent careers, they relocated permanently to the United States, they signed their own business deals, they established their own foundation work through Archwell. Why does the media keep rewriting the script as if they are in some kind of perpetual holding pattern, circling above Windsor, waiting desperately for a call from King Charles giving them clearance to return? They made a choice. They executed that choice. They've been living that choice for years now. Offering Royal Lodge, if this speculation were even remotely true rather than completely fabricated, would supposedly be a symbolic gesture. The door is open, come home. But open for what, exactly? To return to the same press ecosystem that dissected Meghan's every facial expression for hidden meaning, that analyzed her body language frame by frame, that turned her grocery shopping into a scandal? To re-enter an institutional structure that they explicitly, publicly stated was unsustainable for their mental health and family well-being. Gemma on the panel made the most logical, grounded point of the entire segment. Why would she want to come back? She had a terrible time. Exactly. Precisely. That's the question no one else seemed willing to engage with, honestly. Let's not rewrite history here. Let's not pretend Meghan's experience as a working royal was just challenging or difficult in normal ways. Meghan was criticized for holding her bumpy bump, then criticized for not holding her bumpy bump, criticized for eating avocados because apparently that fruit has problematic connotations, criticized for guest editing British Vogue, criticized for wearing nail polish in the wrong shade. The level of scrutiny bordered on absurdist parody. Headlines routinely compared her to other royals, particularly Kate, in ways that were not subtle about their racial and cultural biases. Language used to describe her was consistently loaded and different. The contrast in coverage was documented repeatedly by media analysts. And now, the same media ecosystem that fueled, profited from, and amplified that toxic coverage wants to pretend she might be yearning for a Windsor comeback? Please, be serious. The emotional hook about missing the Queen's last Christmas is specifically designed to tug at heartstrings and create guilt narratives. Yes, family estrangement is sad. Yes, missing final moments with loved ones creates regret. Life is complicated. Family dynamics are messy. Grief is complex. But adult decisions are not based solely on holiday photo opportunities or the optics of family gatherings. Harry and Meghan have created a different path forward. It may not be the path the British media prefers or understands. It may not fit the fairy tale narrative that sells newspapers, but it is theirs. They own it. They live it. They've built it deliberately. What bothers the press most is not their physical absence from the UK. It's their autonomy, their independence, their thriving outside institutional control. The existence of former senior royals thriving outside the palace framework fundamentally challenges the mythology that the institution is the only viable platform for relevance, influence, or meaningful work. Harry's projects did not vanish when he moved to California. His Invictus Games continue growing, his Archwell Foundation operates successfully, his advocacy work reaches global audiences. Meghan's voice did not evaporate when she stepped back from official royal duties. She continues work on issues she cares about. She maintains influence and platform. They simply shifted location and operational structure. And that shift is what profoundly unsettles commentators, who built entire careers analyzing royal proximity as the ultimate measure of importance. If Harry and Meghan are demonstrably happy, stable, productive, and independent outside the royal structure, then the narrative that they need the monarchy completely collapses. So instead, we get fantasy property debates that serve no purpose except maintaining the fiction that they're incomplete without Windsor. Let's also examine the optics of even suggesting they move into Andrew's former residence. Even if this offer were real, which, again, remains entirely speculative with zero confirmation, do we truly, honestly believe Harry and Meghan would want their children growing up in a house so closely tied to Andrew's controversies? The public memory is not short. The internet is not forgetful. Royal Lodge is not just a building with rooms and nice gardens. It carries associations. It carries history. It carries Andrew's scandal imprint. Attempting to rebrand it with the Sussex name would not magically erase that history. It would create new headlines, new commentary, new cycles of scrutiny and speculation. Harry moves into Andrew's old house. What does it mean? And that would completely defeat the entire purpose of why they left in the first place, to escape endless media speculation about every aspect of their lives. Caller Carol understood something fundamental that the panel seemed unable to grasp. This constant discussion is unnecessary. It serves no one except those generating content from it. There is no actual request from the Sussexes for UK accommodation, no indication they are seeking a British base beyond occasional short visits, no evidence they are testing public reaction to potential return scenarios. The media invented a scenario from insider sources and then debated at length whether it should happen, what it would mean, how the public should feel about it. That's not journalism. That's not news analysis. That's self-generating content. That's creating the story you want to cover rather than covering stories that actually exist. And let's be brutally honest about the pattern here, because it's worth naming explicitly. When public attention turns toward genuinely uncomfortable royal topics, especially involving Andrew, his associations, his scandals, questions about institutional protection he received, the focus often pivots suddenly toward Harry and Meghan, toward old grievances, toward memoir excerpts from months ago, toward interviews from years ago, toward speculation about reconciliation or return. It creates noise, sustained, distracting noise. Noise dilutes accountability. Noise shifts conversation away from uncomfortable questions that deserve answers. Noise gives audiences something else to argue about in comment sections. The Jeremy Vine segment wasn't really about housing logistics or thoughtful analysis of family reconciliation possibilities. It was about narrative control, about reinforcing certain ideas. The idea that Harry inherently belongs within the royal framework, that his story is somehow incomplete without Windsor, that Meghan's arc must end where it began, back in the UK, back in the institution. But real life doesn't follow palace storyboards or media wish fulfillment. Montecito is not exile. It is not failure. It is not them hiding or in seclusion, as headlines sometimes suggest. It is a choice, an active, deliberate choice. It is space from toxic dynamics. It is privacy for their children. It is distance from a tabloid ecosystem that profits from manufacturing perpetual conflict. And here's the beautiful irony that seems lost on media outlets perpetuating this coverage. The more they insist on pulling Harry and Meghan back into speculative debates, the more they prove exactly why the couple left in the first place. If a couple can relocate to another continent, build independent lives and careers, and still dominate UK talk shows and newspaper coverage, that says something profound about their relevance. You cannot claim they are irrelevant, washed up, or desperate for attention while simultaneously dedicating multiple segments per week to imaginary property transfers involving them. You cannot argue they are disconnected from royal life while using their names to anchor primetime discussions and drive engagement metrics. The British media needs Harry and Meghan more than Harry and Meghan need the British media. That is the uncomfortable economic truth no one on these panels wants to acknowledge. If genuine reconciliation happens between Harry and his family, it will happen privately. It will not be negotiated through panel discussions, caller hotlines, and speculative talk show segments. And if reconciliation doesn't happen, that too is a family matter that the public is not entitled to litigate or resolve. The public is not entitled to their housing plans. The public is not owed explanations about every family dynamic. Royal Lodge will find an occupant eventually, or it won't. But attaching Harry and Meghan's names to it for engagement and content generation feels transparent and cynical. This cycle is exhausting because it actively refuses to move forward. It insists on staying stuck in 2020, endlessly relitigating the same departure. They left in 2020. It is now 2026, years later. At some point, the narrative must evolve beyond, will they come back? At some point, acceptance of their choice becomes necessary. Maybe the more relevant question is, why does the British media struggle so desperately to let them go? Until that question is answered honestly, we will keep getting these recycled debates about imaginary property offers and invented reconciliation scenarios. But here's what remains absolutely clear. Harry and Meghan are not desperate. They are not drifting aimlessly. They are not waiting anxiously to be lured back like wayward pets. They made a choice, a considered, deliberate choice about how they want to live and raise their family. And whether the British media approves of that choice or not, it was theirs to make. It remains theirs to live. The louder the speculation becomes, the clearer it is that their autonomy unsettles institutions and industries built on the assumption that royal proximity equals the only valid form of success. And maybe that is the real story, the one no panel wanted to honestly discuss. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you're as exhausted as I am, hit subscribe. Let's keep calling out manufactured nonsense when we see it. I'll see you in the next one.